How do you feel when you find out that you've been lied to? How do you feel about being deceived, exploited, and used? How would you feel if you found out that those who used you did so because they bet all their chips on your assumed ignorance, and they were more than happy to exploit you? How would that feel? Well, if you are a gun owner and you voted for Biden and Harris, and if you plan to vote for the Democrats, Ossoff and Warnock in the upcoming Georgia Senate runoff, if you live in Georgia, not only are you cutting off your own nose to spite your face, but you're voting against every single fellow gun owner in this country. In this series of videos, looking at Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's gun control plan, we'll begin with a couple of videos giving a brief overview of their desired policies. Welcome to Courage and the Constitution. I'm just a guy digging behind the headlines to get to the nuggets of truth. I'm tired of the rhetoric and the propaganda from all sides, being lied to by the media, and I just want to know what's really going on in the world. So let's do this. In Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's website, their campaign begins with this quote. Now, it sounds startling at first, and that is until you understand the framing he and his administration and bed partners are creating. It is of immense value to understand the tactics and the strategies being used to manipulate and exploit the vote and the commitment of the low-informed. Joe Biden knows that gun violence is a public health epidemic. Almost 40,000 people die as a result of firearm injuries every year in the United States, and many more are wounded. Some of these deaths and injuries are the result of mass shootings that make national headlines. Others are the result of daily acts of gun violence or suicides that may not make national headlines, but are just as devastating to the families and the communities left behind. Just in that first paragraph, there is so much to unpack. Now, first of all, notice how they conflate gun violence with a public health epidemic. Most people who vote Biden-Harris would never even take pause at that, just accepting it as fact. But the fact is, however, that statement is very misleading. Actually, it's not just misleading, it's false. Violence committed by someone using a gun does not fit under the definition of a public health epidemic. As has been done with so much language in the last few years, certain persons and parties are redefining words to mean that which they don't actually mean. And the gullible, they fall right in line. A health epidemic has a very clear definition. The occurrence of more cases of a disease than would be expected in a community or region during a given time period. A sudden severe outbreak of a disease. So no, gun violence is not a public health epidemic. It is a symptom of something else, something deeper, something broken, and it has nothing to do with guns. Their use of this rhetoric is an insidious scare tactic to prey on the low-informed. Notice how they begin the entire section that spells out their plan with the term gun violence. Now that right there is a clever trick to prime someone's brain to jump to the worst case and trigger their emotions to follow. They know that if they can hook the emotion, then they can hook the vote. Gun violence. It does sound bad though, doesn't it? Like blood flowing in the street kind of bad. It doesn't matter what they write after that. By leading with gun violence, they've already set the hook in the mouths of those who take the bait, and now everything after that phrase, those two words, will be viewed through a certain lens. The next clever trick they use is with their statistic and the careful wording around it. Let's take a look at what the Pew Research Group would say about this health epidemic, this unchecked slaughter of gun violence of 40,000 deaths a year. It sure does sound pretty criminally violent though, doesn't it? It certainly sounds like there are a whole lot of cold-blooded killers lurking our streets. Oh, and the majority of the deaths that are murders with the use of a gun, by the way, those are mostly illegally owned guns. You know, the people who own guns regardless of how much law and enforcement has been placed on legal owners. Pew says, though they tend to get less attention than gun-related murders, suicides have long accounted for the majority of U.S. gun deaths. In 2017, 6 in 10 gun-related deaths in the U.S. were suicides. That's 23,854, while 37% were murders. That's around 14,000, according to the CDC. Now, the remainder were unintentional, involved law enforcement, or they had undetermined circumstances. All right, so by far, the majority of gun deaths are suicide. Now, first, I'm not going to make any light of suicide. For someone to feel that they're to that point to take such a drastic action and to be in that much pain is absolutely heartbreaking, and that experience of the pain that they feel is raw and it's awful. So my heart goes out to them and their loved ones. Now, 2 points with the suicides, however. First, do you know what else ranks high in methods of suicide? Suffocation and poisoning. Secondly, remove firearms from someone who is in that state of mind and that much pain, and they'll find another method. After all, in the UK, where they outlawed guns, murders with knives skyrocketed. They found another method. Now let's take a look at another fact in context of that 40,000 number the progressive Democrats give to scare you and pull at your heartstrings. Also, according to Pew, gun suicides reached their highest recorded level in 2017, but the number of gun murders remained far below the peak in '93, when there were 18,253 gun homicides, and when overall violent crime levels in the U.S. were much higher than they are today. Wait. What? Yeah, you probably weren't expecting to hear that, were you? Gun crime is actually far less today than it was nearly 2 decades ago in this country. Well, you might say, but the news says, yeah, and the Democrats say also. The fact is, you are being played, and you're being manipulated in order to fall in line with what they want from you. And what they want from you is your vote and your dedication. What they want, is actually to disarm the populace. Oh, and one more bit of context that is useful to know. Let's look again at Pew's research. While in 2017 saw the highest total numbers of gun deaths in the U.S., now remember, number also includes suicides and etc., this statistic does not take into account the nation's growing population. On a per capita basis, there were 12 gun deaths per 100,000 people in 2017, the highest rate in more than 2 decades, but still well below the 16.3 gun deaths per 100,000 people in '74, the highest rate in the CDC's online database. Remember, this is just unpacking the first paragraph of a lengthy and, frankly, epically awful and anti-constitutional plan built around manipulated information. A plan they intend to enforce with the full strength they can muster. If they, that's the Democrats, take the Senate and the presidency, especially with Harris known as being one of the furthest progressive politicians today, you can bet they will attack the Second Amendment with an unchecked bloodlust and reckless abandon. In regard to the murders cited on the Biden-Harris website, let's consider Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, and Baltimore. The highest concentration of murders being in impoverished inner urban areas. Now, that's not a gun problem. Those murders are a symptom of social and economic issues, not guns. In fact, to disarm the law-abiding people in these areas is to leave the innocent as helpless victims should someone wish to take advantage of them. So, what is the crux of the progressive Democrats' gun plan? Safety, right? No. No, not safety. As I stated in a previous video, one of their first targets to not just register, but outright ban and confiscate will be what they call the assault rifle or the weapon of war. Both titles are very misleading and absolutely not what the ARs, that's the gun they're referring to, actually is. So no, their plan is not about safety. They would couch it in the word safety, because who doesn't like that? Safety. But really, it is disarming. That assault rifle derangement of theirs, and the millions upon millions it would cost to set up the staff and the database and the manpower and such to enact their ban and confiscation of the ARs, is against a gun that literally factors into less than 1% of gun deaths. So no. It is not about safety at all. AR, by the way, does not stand for assault rifle, nor are they used in war. But just as I said at the beginning of this video, their plan is to peddle their deception to the low-informed, the same who pledge their allegiance to CNN, MSNBC, and the like, because they know that their faithful viewers rarely, if ever, actually bother to dig for the facts themselves. But that is what we do on this channel. Together, we look beyond the headlines and past the lip service. We look past the pandering to see what is really going on behind the curtain. In fact, Joe Biden is appointing Vivek Murthy as head of the HHS. His own tweets have used the public health crisis deception that I already mentioned. He and Joe Biden, as is the classic move with the progressive left, demonize even the NRA. Now, first of all, and really quickly, what is the NRA about? The mainstream media and the political left would have you believe that they are essentially rich white nationalists promoting gun violence and no checks on guns at all. Now, when I hear that, I actually literally laugh. The diversity of the NRA's membership is staggering. They are anti-white nationalists, and they promote and teach heavily safety of firearms so that when people do own them, they know how to handle them safely and with responsibility. They are very much against gun violence. So why does Biden, Harris, and the whole lot hate them so much and make such a big deal about attacking and defeating them? Why does anyone who has a nefarious intent in mind hate and want to remove those who stand in the way of what they want? Oh, and there's also big money to be made in the opposition of firearms. I'll mention the NRA in the next video because that's Biden-Harris's next point. The evil NRA. Now, I'm just one guy. All I can do is be an advocate and display the reality of guns and those who support our constitutional protections and liberties. I give this information, but people who know nothing of gun culture or the Second Amendment community will tell me boldly that I'm wrong. How do you inform the ill-informed who wish not to be informed because they'd rather live in a life in the ignorant bliss of misinformation? Well, that's the question for the ages, and I would welcome your comments. Now, if you find this content of value and you believe others would benefit from it, please like, subscribe, and share. It will do a lot to help us all out.